Are you ready for an adventure with Superman? What is the three body problem? Are you on Team Green or Team Black? What happens in the third season of Sweet Tooth? Well, guys, we're going to be asking these questions and much more on today's episode of Systematic Ecology. We are the Priest of the Geeks. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, joined by the first time I've ever had the opportunity to be with him, Andy Walsh. How's it going, Andy?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Guys, this is going to be a What's New episode, so no geeking out, no recommendations on that end. We're just going to get into this one by starting off by heading into our lightning round. And I'm going to start off with the Acolyte. If you've been listening, you know I have been kind of lukewarm at best and mostly still there, although I will say episode 5 and episode 6 were steps in the right direction. Andy, have you been watching The Acolyte at all?
Unfortunately, I have not. I've been waiting to watch it with my family, and so we're a little bit behind on some things. But
Hey, ain't,
they had me at
ain't nothing
Carrie Ann
wrong with
Moss
that.
as a Jedi.
Yes. Yeah, I think she does well with what she has. I'm just, as opposed to Will and John, I'm not big on what they're trying to say. I'm not real happy about the shorter episodes with the budget they had. So whatever, that's on me. Uh, is there anything you've been geeking out on recently for the lightning round kind of section?
Yes, I watched this show on Apple TV called Sugar. It's
Okay.
a noir story with Colin Farrell. And right up until it isn't, which is why I thought it would be interesting to bring up. I don't want to spoil it in the lightning
Okay.
round, but if you like things that kind of mash up genres in an unexpected way, and or if you like Colin Farrell, who's very talented, then I think it's worth giving a shot. The episodes are only like half an hour, so it goes by pretty quickly, and it was interesting. And I would like someone to watch it so I could talk to them about it, because it was just kind of like, whoa, what did I just watch?
And that was Sugar.
Sugar, yes, with Colin Farrell
Okay.
on Apple TV.
Okay. Next up, the next portion of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation Season 2, Part 2 came out. And if you're following along with Anazao Ministries, you know I started a podcast called Why I Don't Like. And this is the show that I'm covering. So I am not happy with certain things that have happened. Then again, this show has never really made me happy. But I do want to say that I don't hate the show. I don't hate anyone who likes the show, but it's kind of one of those things that just really irks me at the end of the day with certain choices that are made. And this season was no stranger to that, especially when polygamy gets thrown in. That's so much fun. Andy, anything else for your lightning round?
Sure, I'll just throw in a plug for the Fall Guy, which is now out on digital streaming. Not enough people saw it in the theaters, but maybe hopefully folks will watch it at home, and we'll get more movies in that vein. It's a great big love letter to stunts and stunt men and women and action filmmaking. And so if those kinds of things are your jam, it is just a lot of fun.
All right. Anything else for the lightning round? Are we good to go?
Also throw in, I'm reading a book called Fighting Without Fighting as a something to go along with The Fall Guy. It's about kung fu cinema, but also how it's impacted Hollywood, action cinema in general. It's by Luke White. It's not exactly a brand new book. I think it came out last year, but it's been an interesting companion as kind of getting the history and background, both in the US and China, on the development of action cinema and martial arts cinema in particular. So if you like geeking out on that sort of thing, it's a good read.
I love me some good kung fu films, no matter how bad they end up being. Just like to see some people beating up other people, you know. And there's something I really want to talk about, but I think I'll just leave it very nebulous because I don't know if that's been announced at all. So I'll just say that and just be mysterious for the sake of being mysterious. All right,
Excellent.
it's time to go into the proper discussion. We're done with the lightning round. My first pick for this What's New episode is the second season of My Adventures with Superman. Now, I know beforehand we had talked, you have not been watching this. Had you watched the first season at all?
I've not seen the first season. I did watch a couple of the most recent episodes, knowing that we would be talking about it, just to kind of get the
Okay.
flavor and to get a sense of where the story was.
Yeah. So for those unaware, you haven't heard us talking about it before. This is a newer animated show. It's being shown on Adult Swim, which surprised me, which actually enhances the fact that they're able to show a little more violence than it would have if this was shown during the day. a little more heavy subject matter, but nothing that feels like it takes away from the spirit of Superman. It's him trying to establish himself. It's a very young Superman, young Lois Lane, young Jimmy Olsen, as they're figuring out the world, as they're becoming friends, Lois and Superman, starting their relationship with one another. It's been a lot of really good fun. There's some changes along the way I'm not big on when it comes to, how they design certain characters, or how, what was I going to say? Um, how certain characters are represented with their characterization. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I am a huge fan of the show. It is fun. And there's very few things that I'm watching that are like genuinely this fun right now. And I really, really appreciate when people are having fun with their product. So, what are your initial thoughts having watched some of the episodes without a lot of context?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. It was clear that part of the appeal is, sort of more of a young adult take on Superman. I think that's a good way to address the perennial issues of, oh, Superman's too powerful, Superman can solve anything. Well, if you set stories in his early days and he's still trying to figure things out, that creates opportunities for drama, because he might not know how he can solve the problem, even if he has the power to do so, or the the abilities to do so.
Yeah.
It did seem like it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I can see where, having some of the characters a lot, everybody seems very young, and that's kind of an interesting take on folks like Lex Luthor, or Deathstroke was in one of the episodes that I watched, and that was an interesting take on that character.
I agree completely.
But overall, yeah, I love a good bit of Superman, and this seemed like a fun and cool bit of Superman. So
Yeah. Now, obviously, you're an X-Men guy, but like, what is your history with Superman in comics, animation, all over?
yeah, I mean, actually, Superman was probably my gateway to superheroes in general. Both the Christopher Reeve films, and
Mm.
I remember getting like big hardback collections of Superman comics from the library. There must have been like 50s and 60s Superman comics that they had reprinted in black and white in these giant, omnibus style kind of things. And yeah, so that was my first introduction to the world of superheroes, were those two things. And obviously, there's very little that hasn't been said about how great Christopher Reeve was as Superman, and how good especially those first couple films are. Those 1950s and 60s comics are pretty bonkers. Some of the story ideas, some of the goofy powers that they gave Superman. But as an 8-year-old or whatever I was, that was all good fun. So yeah, I really like Superman, and and have enjoyed a lot of Superman comics, TV shows, movies, the whole range.
Yeah, my introduction to him would have been I think it's 97, Superman the Animated Series cartoon. And I grew up in that Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men, all the times. Those 90s cartoons were kind of what really got me into comics to begin with. And it helps a lot. My dad is also a huge collector and has been ever since he was a kid. So at the time, he was a high school teacher, and he had his comics there because there wasn't a space to store them at home. So he had an entire, what was supposed to be a locker room filled with just his longboards and everything. So whenever I was with him for while he was coaching or what have you, I'd be in there like reading Marvel Team Up and Action Comics and everything. So that's how I got into that. And actually, we just recently were at a comic shop. We were visiting my brother, sister, and niece in Chicago, and I wish I could remember the name of it. It was a really nice shop, and bought a lot of Action Comics and Superman from like the '70s, and just to fill the spots in the list, felt really good. So yeah, this show, I really enjoy its take on Superman. As someone, people have kind of accused me on the show of being like, what word they used? It was like not hope. I don't know, just an idealist about hope and stuff like that. And Superman is one of those properties that, like, that's kind of the core premise. It's
Right.
like if you're supposed to feel okay, everything's going to be okay, and this show makes me feel that. Even when, like, yeah, he gets knocked around by a supervillain, or Amanda Waller does what she does and causes turmoil and anti-alien trust, and like, yeah, at the end of the day, I feel like he's got it. So I really appreciate that aspect of his character. What about him kind of draws you to Superman as a character?
Yeah, I think that the aspirational nature of Superman, the hope that he inspires, his understanding that I mean he was kind of the with great power comes great responsibility character before Spider-Man, right? I don't know that it was ever articulated in those words, but he certainly has that same ethos of, well, I can do these things, and so I have to use it use it to benefit other people, not just myself. And yeah, I think those are all good values to aspire to, even if they're we can't be as perfect at it as a fictional character.
I think that's kind of the point of him, is that he's supposed to be the best of us, and yet also alien at the same time. But because he was raised human, it's kind of like the Worf from Star Trek. It's like the idealized Klingon. Superman is like the idealized human being. It's like, yeah, there's plenty of problems with actual Klingons. There's plenty of problems with actual humans, but they strive to be what the culture says we're supposed to be like. And I like that a lot about a character who chooses to be that way, even though obviously he's Kryptonian. Obviously he could, if he wanted to, take over the entire world. But that's not Clark. That's not Ma and Pa Kent's boy. And part of this show, as you've seen in some of these episodes, is of course Amanda Waller being Amanda Waller. And part of her is that legitimate fear of, there is this entity out there we can't control, we don't know the name of, who just showed up one day, is super powerful. He could turn on us at any time. So why aren't we working measures against it? So do you think that she has a point about unknown factors like superheroes and aliens?
It is one of those challenging things to kind of wrestle with, because of course it's all made up. But yes, you can see, right? You can see the point in some of these things, right? In X-Men comics, it's the Sentinels and all that program.
Yes.
Superman has the same kind of thing, right? There's always that element of, well, yeah, if these people really existed, we would have reason to be a little bit worried that they can do things to us that are, we have no recourse for. And there are stories, like Chronicle or Brightburn or whatever that kind of push that direction of, what if the guardrails are taken off? What if the character doesn't have the same morals, the same ethos as a Superman or a Batman? So yeah, it's within the context of the story, you can see where somebody like Amanda Waller, and even sometimes where Lex Luthor is coming from, with that perspective of, hey, what do we do in case this doesn't go well? Or what if, yes, Superman, maybe we trust Superman, but he's not the only one out there, and he can't be everywhere at all times, and we can't always rely on him. So yeah, I think there's something there, but it is hard to know how exactly to map that to the real world, when there are certainly asymmetrical situations in the real world, but not necessarily at the same level. Or maybe it's just, I have the privilege of being in a society where if there is asymmetry, it's mostly in the other direction.
Yeah, it's an easy question to answer from the comic side of thing for the most part, but like real world, yeah, you kind of go, if a Professor X exists out there and he can mentally manipulate anyone at any point of time of his choosing, or a Jean Grey or Madeline Pryor, or the plenty of other telepaths that are in just the X-Men alone, don't you think maybe we should, I don't know, make sure they're not using that power for evil? Like, would a mutant registration act, would a superhero registration act be what should actually happen? The idealist in me when it goes, no, like we got to trust our heroes. They're looking after us, but I also live in the world, and I know not everyone is doing this for pure intention. So if this were actually real, as much as I hate myself for saying it, I would be behind like a registration kind of system. So we know, okay, you're capable of doing this. We've got these systems in place to make sure that power isn't abused, but also without like going full uh, Apocalypse or full Sentinel or full Lex Luthor on anyone, where you are now afraid to use your abilities because we're afraid of you. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I would probably lean a little bit in the other direction of, I don't know about like registration acts. I think there's an important distinction to be made between legislating behavior and legislating ability or identity, right? That we don't want to make it illegal to be who you are, but we do want
Yes.
to make it illegal to do certain things, especially do certain things to other people. And so, yeah, that is a difficult line to draw in the case of a telepath, right? How do you even police that? How do you even know what's going on? And how do you provide a reasonable deterrent as opposed to having to deal with the after effects, right? Because some of these characters can do things that, well, by the time they're done, right, there is no coming back. There is nothing you can do after the fact. And so I can understand the impulse towards prevention. But I do think, even if it means we have to live with some risk, right? We want to not go down that road of legislating against what people are able to do, or who people are, and kind of registering people in a way that also creates opportunities for exploiting or persecuting those folks.
Yeah, I think one of the best ones that ever handled this was actually the Justice League cartoon, where we get to see like the Justice Lords controlling an entire world, and then we have Amanda Waller learning that information and then creating Task Force X and everything, being like as a deterrent, and then the superhero is also kind of going, I get why they're afraid because of what we're capable of. Now we need to learn from that and be better. And I think at the end of the day, that was handled extremely well. Did you ever watch those?
Not enough to get a sense of that kind of scale of storytelling.
That's fair. There's only so much time in the world. We can't watch and read everything. So it's hard as a geek sometimes. It's like, especially with like the two of the topics that you're bringing up. Like, in fact, we can go ahead and transfer that way after a rate and review. I give My Adventures of Superman a 9 out of 10. I really love this show. I'm ready to see more of what they have. But let's go to the three body problem. Andy, could you explain this to the audience?
Sure. It is a tough one to talk about because there is lots that can be spoiled. And I don't want to give away everything, but I also want to be able to talk about it a little bit. And so that means talking about some things. It is the thing that I think is most interesting, especially relevant to this conversation, is that it's essentially a story in which something like the My Adventures of Superman plot, or the plot of Man of Steel film, if that were to happen, but without Superman living among us, right? So there's only this alien threat, but without that element of, well, we have somebody on our side, or we have somebody who might be on our side, right? There is just this sort of looming aliens that have superior abilities and technology, and so the protagonists of the show are basically the Amanda Wallers of this world, right? They are tasked with how do we defend against this threat of alien invasion, alien incursion, and what lines are we willing to cross? Are there any, should we draw any lines, or is it everything on the table when there's this existential threat of this level? And so that's one of the central through lines, the central storylines of the show, arguably the central storyline. And the interesting wrinkle is that there's a long-term aspect of it, and something that I really appreciate about the show is that it deals in a little bit in the physical reality of light speed travel and the impossibility of such things. So these aliens are coming at us, but only at 1% of light speed. So we have a couple 100-year horizon before to figure things out. And I like the ambition of that kind of storytelling, because it introduces problems that you don't have in other kinds of stories, of just how do you plan for something that far in advance? How do you ensure that things stay on track when it's going to exceed the lifetime of any person who starts those plans? And that, so there's some ambition there. There's some interesting wrinkles, and there are some interesting solutions to that I won't spoil too much. But yeah, that was what I found the most interesting part about it. I was less interested in it's a very overtly theological show, in that there's a lot of talk about, because we have all this scientific knowledge, we scientists don't have to believe in God anymore. But now what do we do when we encounter these essentially omniscient and all-powerful aliens? Should we think of them as gods? There's a whole cult that has grown up around essentially worshiping these aliens or welcoming these aliens as potential saviors, to the point that they even address them as our Lord or my Lord. So it's very overtly religious and very overtly, cult-like in its depiction. I'm not sure that there's anything interesting to say there, but it certainly is kind of poking at the typical, atheism. Science drives people to atheism kind of angle. I think it was worthwhile to engage with, just kind of being aware that that it's something kind of overtly in that space. But I'm not sure that anything new to say about that.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll pause there and see if you have any kind of reactions or questions.
No. Yeah, sure. So it's my understanding these are based on Chinese novels, correct?
Yeah. So there's a series of 3 novels that have been translated from Chinese. Yes.
Okay. Now, does this take place over? You said that we have like 100+ years to prepare. Does the novel or the show take place over that amount of time? Do we have characters die off because of stuff like that? Do we just transition, time skip kind of thing? Or is that like a huge spoiler?
Right. So this is the first, this seems to be adapting. I haven't read the books. So people, there's a lot to spoil, like I said, in these stories, which meant that when people talked about the book, they were pretty vague. And so I never really kind of got a sense of what is this book about and would it be something that I would like? And so I never got around to reading it. But I decided to everybody was talking about the TV show. And so I decided to give that a try. And now I kind of get like, oh, okay, I see what was interesting about this, but I also see why nobody wanted to say anything about what it was really about.
Gotcha.
So I believe over the course of 3 books, that time horizon of several hundred years will come into play. I think it's okay to say that that the full extent of that time horizon is not explored in the first season, which seems to be adapting the first of those 3 books. But they're definitely They're definitely setting up the issues that presents, but it doesn't explore that whole timeline in the first season.
Okay. Now, have we been confirmed for season 2?
They have, yes. If you go on Netflix now, it proudly proclaims that it's been renewed, and I believe the plan is that they've just already gone ahead and committed to 2 more seasons, so that they'll finish the story as written in the books.
Oh, even better! I love those guarantees. Okay, so since this is written from a Chinese perspective, you haven't read the book, so maybe I can't ask that question that way. And do you know if there was any race lifting for like a more wider American audience that was done, that they changed characters to different nationalities or something like that?
Right. I mean, there are definitely plenty of Chinese national characters in the TV show. It is my understanding that there's one character who was basically split into 5 characters for the TV show.
Oh.
And so, yeah, there's definitely some changes or additions of race and gender there, and role. And I think that was done for a couple of different reasons. Partly I think it does help to make the cast of the show more international, not just more American friendly, but more friendly to anybody outside of China. But there is still definitely a strong Chinese angle to the story. There are definitely Chinese characters who play significant roles. So I can't say for sure that it was all handled well or that it doesn't take away from the book, but it certainly isn't completely removed from its origins.
Okay. Well, while we're on the subject, is that something that irks you, like it does me, like whenever someone a gender is changed or a race is changed from one thing to another, whether I don't care what the race is or what the gender is, when a character is established in a source material as this, and you're trying to adapt that thing to film or television or animation or what have you, and then they just change it without saying like, "Hey, we're reimagining things." Like that's kind of like the outward for me is like you say reimagining, I go, "Okay, well, they don't have to be the same. They're doing their own thing." Like I don't know. I asked like 50 different questions there. Like parse
Yeah.
my stupidity.
Um, I think it's one of those things that can be done well and can be done poorly.
Okay.
I don't think I have a usual kind of gut reaction to it. I think it depends on the situation.
Fair enough.
Because when you're adapting things, sometimes it makes a lot of sense to make those kinds of changes. Or the very first thing that comes to mind, which is a little bit different because it's not fictional, but right, the Hamilton musical, right, obviously makes some very specific choices in casting, but there's a point to it. They're making comment through that choice, and I think there are plenty of opportunities to do that sort of thing and to do it well. But sometimes it's done just to kind of tick a box or satisfy some whatever, and then maybe it may not be done so well, or it may not have much of a point, and that in those cases it might stick out a little bit more.
Well, I think you raise an excellent point when you bring up theater, like especially something like that or voice acting. You typically go uh, talent over appearance, mostly because, I mean, in most theatrical productions, you don't have everything you need. You have a select group of people who are qualified to do this, but then it may not meet certain like looks or genders or something like that because you just have that select group. Same thing with voice acting. Like not everyone who voices, Japanese characters in anime is going to be Japanese because they're probably going to be white because that's what they had around that time. So I'm a little more okay with something like that because when you only have a small pool, to fish out of, that's what you kind of have to deal with. Now, acting, I kind of get a little more upset about sometimes a little too much for my own good, because you have a wider net to throw out. But oh, I don't know. We don't need to keep focusing on this. So, my last question, I swear, and we can move on. What is the titular three-body problem? I know this is a scientific idea about planets at some point in time. Uh, I think from what I had researched earlier, were you able to explain it all, or have they explained it at all?
That yes, it is very clear why the show is called Three Body Problem, but in the book, once you get into it, so the classic thing from physics, that if you have two objects like two suns, two stars orbiting each other, you can write differential equations and solve them analytically to figure out where they're going to be at any point in time. If you introduce a third body, a third star, then while there are plenty of mathematical tools that you can use to make predictions, there's no analytical solution that will tell you precisely in all circumstances where those objects are going to be in the future. And so the aliens who represent this existential threat come from a solar system that has three stars that the planet that they live on orbits. And that creates very unpredictable dynamics for like seasons and things like that. And so it's created conditions for these aliens that they have a very different culture and background because of the very different kind of world that they live in, and the very different experience that their society developed in. And there's some drama that's created out of that. But yeah, so it's about the title refers to their solar system and the challenges in predicting three bodies. Now, my first reaction was, well, hang on, it's three stars and a planet. Isn't that a four-body problem? But I was told that because the planet doesn't really affect the orbits or the motions of the three stars, that it's still, most physicists would still consider that a three-body problem.
Okay, yeah, there's very huge difference in size. All right. Well, before we transition to the next topic, how would you rate and review this first season of Three Body Problem?
Yeah, I think I would personally give it something like a 7 out of 10. It got pretty gory and gruesome at times, more than I was expecting and more than I would have cared for. If some other people might rate it higher because they're not quite as bothered by that, and also a little bit bothered by all scientists are non-believers and all that kind of thing, which I may be being a little bit unfair, but it definitely leaned into the stereotypes more than it interrogated with nuance. So yeah,
it's an easy trope.
Yeah. But there was also still plenty of big, cool ideas that I appreciated about it. So yeah, 7 out of 10.
Okay. All right. Well, next up on our docket, we have House of the Dragon Season 2. We are continuing from the first season where Rhaenyra, who is supposed to be appointed by her father as the first official queen of the Seven Kingdoms in a male-dominated society, is being challenged by her now, goodness gracious, these royal things, a mother-in-law who was her friend of the same age, practically, who has had children with Rhaenyra's father, who will now also have a claim to the throne. And now we are between Team Black, which is Rhaenyra's side, and Team Green, which is Alicent's side. Andy, have you watched Game of Thrones or House of Dragon at all?
Yeah, my wife got into the Game of Thrones books, and so we would dip in and out of the show when HBO was a free add-on to our cable subscription at the time. Every once in a while, they'd throw us a free month or two, and we'd binge a few episodes just to kind of catch up on what was going on. And actually, the part that I was most interested in Game of Thrones was that similar sort of, how do you deal with an existential threat that looms across many generations, and how does that impact all these other political squabbles and throne drama that's going on around it, and how do people kind of rally beyond that to deal with this bigger existential threat? I thought was an interesting theme. We did watch House of Dragon season 1, and I frankly personally missed that element. I was like, oh, this is all the things that I wasn't all that interested in, the soap opera, royal drama, without any of the sort of opportunity for heroism and uniting people around a common cause and all that kind of thing. Obviously, It's well done for what it is, and hard to complain too much about a show with dragons. But yeah, that I personally would have missed that aspect of the sort of Game of Thrones world.
Yeah, as of this recording, we're 3 episodes in season 2. I know a little of what's going to happen later on. I'm very interested to see where things go. But what has kind of always been, I've always kind of had that nagging in the back of my head when it comes to Martin's work here, is kind of a hopelessness in his series of like, well, people are just going to be people, and no matter how stable you make things, people are going to break down. And like, yeah, I can kind of get behind some of that because I also live in this world. But it just seems like a bullying kind of way of like, if you don't think the same way I do at times, you're too naive or anything to get anything done. And kind of one of the things I want to ask you is, when we have all these incredibly difficult situations here where both people in their own ways have legitimate claims to this throne, and yet it causes a war to break out, it causes houses to be divided, how are we supposed to navigate these difficult situations in a God-honoring fashion, ignoring the show itself, but like in our own life? Like, how are we supposed to do that in a world like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think trying to find a way to maximize the opportunities for everyone, right? Something that I think Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon have done at times, but could maybe do more of, is how does this affect everybody else, right? Where there's all of this royal family drama, but most people aren't a member of any of these families and don't really care.
Yes.
I did try to catch up a little bit on the season 2 rather, the 3 episodes of season 2. just to be able to chat a little bit. And I did like the bit where, and I apologize because I can't. They all have the same name or practically the same name, and I can't quite keep everybody straight.
You are perfectly fine. This is a safe place.
Matt Smith shows up to the one castle, and they're just kind of like, okay, fine, you're the boss now. Would you like some dinner? Like we're not really into this whole like squabbling and picking sides. Like we're here to get along. We're here to live our daily lives and get food on the table and hang out with each other and all this kind of stuff. And it's I like that little moment. And yeah, I think more of that of just like remembering that it's back to the Superman thing, remembering that this power is to be to the benefit of other people, not just to enrich or satisfy the whims of the few in power.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to throw Christ into a situation like this in a world where he's not there and intentionally not put there, even though we have, if you'll look at our Game of Thrones religions episodes we did previously on systematic ecology, there is a 7-in-1 situation instead of a 3-in-1 for like the Church of the Seven. So you can kind of put it in there. It's not the same exactly, but the idea of how can we be people seeking after Christ in a world where everyone just seems to not care. And that's an easy accusation to throw against our own world and even this world here for Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. So what am I supposed to do with that? How do I not just feel like, well, there's no point, Jesus is going to come back either way. What is my role here? Well, I mean, just by looking what people have done. And that's why we look back on scripture and we see things like, Esther rising above her current situation to save people in a way that no one else was capable of doing, of Jesus himself being in another impossible situation and yet still being the man God who would die for our sins, for people who were murdering him right there. It doesn't matter the time and place, like it would have happened regardless. And that's what I'm called. Oh, that was a nice little thunder over there. Don't know if that caught on the mic. If I am called to do that same thing, I'm called to serve God and not man. Like, how is that possible? Well, I need to be in scripture. I need to be in a community with people who are pushing me towards that same thing, to having that same goal. And it's a lot harder to do if I'm by myself, which is where I tend to do things. I have to continually learn the lesson of lone wolf Christian is never a thing, has never been a thing, and will never be a thing. So I think one thing I would call myself and other people out would be, don't leave this world behind. It's easier to do that, but it's a lot harder to stay in it, to be talking to people. I mean, just using our current political climate in America as the perfect example. And you guys can also check out the whole church episode that just released on how should the church be bipartisan or not. That just dropped today. And then how can I reach out to that person who thinks differently than me? And yet I can still respect them. I can still love them. And even if it's only one-sided on my part, I'm still doing my job. So I guess my answer would be just be Jesus. But at the end of the day, you need a little more than that to bolster that idea. What do you think, Andy? I'm rambling.
Yeah, I mean, certainly be Christ-like is hard to argue against. Easier said than done. There's certainly, yes. looking for the ways. Who can I help? Even if it seems small in the grand scale of things, right? That's all most of us can do, right? Very few of us have a dragon and can raise a whole city in defense of something or whatever, right? But we can do small things. We can share food. We can share shelter. We can share encouragement. And yes. I think the other thing is to be Christ-like, but also remember that one of the things he encourages us to do is be childlike, right? Keep that sort of that hope, that innocence, that sort of not exactly naive, but not hardening ourselves or being too cynical either about the world. Unfortunately, the Game of Thrones world doesn't have a lot of great examples of that because they put so many of the children in positions where they have to be just as cynical and hardened as the adults because they have to be the adults in a lot of situations, or at least the children that get promoted to prominence in the story. But still, I think there's an element there as well to remember that maybe on some days it might be easier to keep that in mind because it's a little bit more tangible. We can see more concrete examples of childlikeness around us.
I think you raise an excellent point. Being childlike versus childish, it's easy to be childish. It's easy to throw your hands up and say nothing matters, everything sucks, and then I can do whatever I want. It's far more difficult to be childlike in that fashion of here's how things are supposed to be. Here's what I'm supposed to do. Like I'm supposed to follow rules. I'm supposed to love people like Jesus loved me. And yeah, that's easier to say, but it's a lot harder to actually enact in the world. And that's what makes it worth doing. It doesn't always feel like that, but it's what we're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else you want to say on House of Dragon before we move on?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. I will also rate this. No, I'll give this a 9.5. As depressing as Martin's works can be at times, I am still in it to win it with this one. I'm ready to see more. I'm still ready to see Creek and Stark come in. I want to see my Starks. I'm hoping this season we see them more. So there's that. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you may see my lights going out. Looks like that thunderstorm may be doing some damage on this incredibly old dorm room I'm in that is separate from the rest of campus. They put the lepers over here to where we just have to deal with bad situations like this. So if I go offline, that's why. As we move on to our next topic, so hopefully we'll be able to finish this out. But Sweet Tooth, the final season, season 3, was released last month. So Andy, take it away.
Yeah, so I actually didn't do this on purpose, believe it or not, but that childlike quality is definitely a big part of the story of Sweet Tooth, right? It is another one of these sort of existential threat stories, and a big part of the theme is that we need to retain some of that childlike, again, not naivete, but lack of cynicism, right? Believing in the best of people, or taking people that they're going to be good faith actors and being a good faith actor yourself. So anyway, more specifically, what is Sweet Tooth about? Right. So it's a world more or less present day where a pandemic has occurred, right? And the first season of this show, I believe, was filmed before the COVID-19 pandemic, but then finished during it and released during it. And so that was a very interesting experience because they clearly had made some tweaks to it to more visually reflect the reality of living with a contagious disease. I think there was more masking in the first season than had been originally filmed, if I understand correctly. And so yeah, so there's this deadly pandemic that is going around the world, but there's also this unusual phenomenon of children being born with some animal-like features. So the main character there, who is called Sweet Tooth because he loves to drink maple syrup just straight, he has some deer-like features, right? So he has deer antlers and deer ears, and pretty much every kid is different. There's wolves and bears and porcupines and birds, different kinds of birds, eagles, and I don't remember the whole menagerie, but each kid is kind of its own unique hybrid. And so the overall story is figuring out that yes, these two things are connected, and is there a way to stop the pandemic, and is there a way to stop the pandemic that doesn't also endanger these hybrid children? And so
okay.
the first two seasons were a lot of kind of uncovering that mystery, figuring out what had gone on, what was connected to what, learning the history of this character. And then he has the very typical, like, he grows up in a sheltered situation with just his dad, and then something happened. There's an inciting incident, and he has to go out into the wider world and meets different characters along the way, and has a strong sort of Odyssey flavor to it. I'm not sure that things map exactly to the specific dangers of the Odyssey, like Oh Brother Where Art Thou tried to do, but it definitely has that. It's that kind of a story of hero goes on a journey to and has to deal with various sort of episodic dangers along the way. And so this final season is about kind of bringing that main story to a conclusion and answering those questions of, is there something that can be done about the pandemic, and what will it mean for the future of both the non-hybrid people and these hybrid children? And I won't spoil how it ends, but the main character is a child, and it is a family-ish show. Definitely not for little kids, but it is definitely meant to draw in a family audience. So you can maybe guess that it's not all doom and gloom, but I won't get into all the particulars. This is something that my family and I watched together, so that was a positive thing about it. We enjoyed kind of getting into the characters. There are definitely aspects of the science. My day job is in public health. My educational background is in infectious disease biology. So there were definitely moments where I winced, and definitely moments where I was like, okay, no, that's actually a good thing. There was a moment in this season where a bunch of characters were together and kind of celebrating, and I was like, I'm not sure that this is such a good idea. And then the very next scene is, oh yes, it was. I was right. It was not a good idea. My concerns were in fact well founded. So yeah, that was definitely an interesting whole aspect to the show, given my professional background. The hybrid biology is a little bit harder to swallow, but it's definitely more of a fantasy kind of magical realism. You just kind of have to go with it.
Okay, yeah, I was about to ask, is it more mystical in that sense, or is it just like this is like the one big lie in the series, is that this is capable of happening, just accept it?
Yeah, while it does get into a lot of how did this come to happen and all, there is definitely no further explanation than just these kids are being born this way. We can't explain how in any sort of biological terms it's happening, or what it means, or anything like that. So yeah, you do just kind of have to accept that this is a world in which this works this way. Okay.
And this was based off a comic, is it not?
Yeah, it's a Jeff Lemire comic. So he wrote and drew it. He has a very he works in like watercolors or whatever. You probably, if you've been around comics in the past decade or so, you've probably seen the cover image from one of the early issues of A Boy with Deer Antlers. Got pretty widely circulated. It's a very striking image, and it raised a lot of questions of what exactly is this book about. And it was a well-regarded comic series, and I think it's been fairly successfully adapted as a show.
So how would you feel about rating the entire show, or just season 3? Which one do you want to choose?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're more or less in the same ballpark. That they all felt of a piece. I would probably give it an 8 out of 10 overall. There may be there's a part of me that wants to rate some of it a little bit lower, just so that that scientist nitpicker in me. But in terms of I think it's very well done in terms of developing its themes, and there are definitely positive messages about working together, working for the benefit of others, all those kinds of things that we've been talking about. How do you embrace somebody who is different from you? How do you relate to somebody who is different from you? Those are all good themes, and I think it does it well. Yeah, again, maybe a little bit more younger, pitched for a younger audience than cynical adults. But there's definitely things for adults to get out of it, and if nothing else, we need those reminders from time to time.
Perfect. Yeah, it sounds like a really fun, whimsical show. Like if your entire family watched it. How old are your kids? You might is that something you want to share? If not, don't worry about it.
It's fine. They are now nearly adults themselves. My son is 18 and starting college in the fall, and my daughter is 17. So they were a
Okay.
little bit younger. I don't know if the first season came out now, if they would be as interested in it. But 4 years ago, it was kind of right. It hit them, I think, right about exactly at the right level, and so then they were just kind of hooked on it.
Okay. Perfect. Well, Andy, thank you for joining me tonight for our What's New episode. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed hearing what you had to say. So, as far as these four series are concerned, or even something we mentioned in the lightning round, what would you say is your top recommendation for the audience to check out?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably, and I haven't watched all of it, but I think probably My Adventures of Superman has the broadest appeal and the easiest thing to sort of wholeheartedly recommend. All the other things that have some adult elements that your mileage may vary, how much you want to stomach those kinds of things. Even Sweet Tooth, it definitely goes to some dark places and has some heavy issues. So yeah, I think the easiest thing to just say, yeah, this is worth your time and you would enjoy is a Superman cartoon.
Okay. Yeah, I agree that has the wider appeal. I think what I would personally recommend is something I haven't watched because it's appealing to me is actually the Three Body Problem because that sounds extremely fascinating. Having to deal with repercussions. We know alien life is here; it's heading our way. What do we do with that information? Sounds a lot of fun, and I meant to check this out forever ago when it released, but I forgot. So I'll definitely be adding that to my list of things to watch later on. So, guys, thank you for listening today. We cannot do this without you. We really appreciate your support. Please leave a like and subscribe below if you're on YouTube. If you don't do that, you break Will's heart, and Will has suffered enough. We can't let that poor heart suffer any more harm. So please just leave him a like and subscribe. Now, if you're on the podcast, please leave a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice to help us with the ratings there to find more people so we can keep spreading the joy that is systematic ecology to you. As well, since you guys have got us to 100 subscribers on YouTube, we are going to be doing a special Q&A session at a later date to be determined where we will answer your questions. It could be anything that you send our way. We will compile a list, and as many hosts as possible will join in, and we'll try to get the hosts who aren't on to get their answers as well if you have a specific question for a specific host. And we just want to reward you guys with a Q&A session that you can just ask us literally anything. As well, I do want to thank some people who helped sponsor our show. Thank you to Ethan Overcash, Austin Nance, and Amber Riley. But most importantly, remember, we are all the chosen people, a geekdom of priests. Oh, that is the wrong music. That's a Joshua problem now. See you guys.